I didn't fall apart, that would have been honest. I decayed, slowly, like something expensive left to rot in a locked room no one ever opens. You wouldn't have seen it, nobody did. From the outside, I was precision. Every move calculated, every word placed exactly where it needed to land. People leaned in when I spoke, doors opened before I knocked. I built a life where hesitation didn't exist, where weakness had no oxygen, and that's the part I don't say out loud. I wasn't just successful. I was addicted to being seen that way. There's a certain power in being the man who always knows, the one who never breaks rhythm, the one people rely on without question. But power like that has a cost, not up front. It invoices you later, in ways you don't immediately recognize. It started in quiet moments, not dramatic, not cinematic, just small absences, like the way I stopped noticing sunsets, or how conversations became transactions. Even laughter felt rehearsed, like I was hitting the right notes without feeling the music. One night, I remember this clearly, I walked into my apartment after a long day. Everything was exactly where it should be. Clean, controlled, perfect. Too perfect. The lights were off except for the faint glow from the city bleeding through the curtains. There was no sound, no movement, just the low hum of electricity running through a place that looked alive, but wasn't. I stood there longer than I needed to, keys still in my hand, jacket still on, not moving, and this thought slipped in, quiet, almost polite. Why does this feel empty? I brushed it off. That's what I did best. Dismiss anything that didn't align with the image I'd built. Because if I slowed down long enough to actually feel it, I might have had to admit something I wasn't ready to face. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can build a life so efficient, so optimized, that it removes anything unpredictable, including joy, including connection, including you. I told myself I was focused, disciplined, ahead of everyone else, but there's a difference between being ahead and being alone in a place no one else can reach, and I chose not to see that difference. Tell me something. When everything in your life looks right, but something inside you feels off, do you listen to it? Or do you do what I did, and turn the volume up on everything else just to drown it out? Because that silence, it doesn't go away, it waits. It gets sharper, more specific, more personal. It starts asking questions you can't answer with money, or status, or control. Questions like, who are you when no one's watching? And more importantly, do you even recognize that person anymore? I didn't, not really. I knew the version of me that performed, the one that executed, the one that delivered results without hesitation, but the one that felt, the one that paused, doubted, questioned. I buried him so deep I almost forgot he existed. Almost, because sometimes, usually late at night, when the world went quiet, he'd find a way back up, not loud, not dramatic, just present, like a shadow I couldn't quite outrun. There was this moment, another night, I caught my reflection in the glass of a dark window, the city behind me glowing, alive, moving, and me, still. For a second, it didn't feel like I was looking at myself. It felt like I was looking at someone I had constructed, piece by piece, until the original version was nowhere to be found. And the worst part? It worked. That version of me got everything I said I wanted. Respect, influence, control. But somewhere in that process, I stopped asking if it was actually me who wanted those things, or if I just became what the world rewards the fastest. There's a difference, a dangerous one. Because if you build a life around who you think you're supposed to be, eventually you wake up in it and realize you don't belong there. I felt that, not all at once, not in some dramatic collapse, just in fragments, in the way silence lingered longer than it should, in the way success stopped feeling like anything at all, in the way I avoided certain thoughts like they were threats. And maybe that's the real beginning of losing everything, not when things fall apart, but when they stop meaning anything. I didn't say it out loud, I didn't admit it to anyone, but deep down, I knew something was slipping. I just didn't know how far it had already gone, or what it was going to cost me to finally face it. I didn't want to be loved, I wanted to be undeniable. There's a difference most people don't catch until it's too late. Love asks you to be known. Being undeniable only asks you to be impressive. And I chose impressive. Every time. It started subtly. A comment here, a compliment there. The way people looked at me when I walked into a room, like I had something they didn't, I fed off that. Not because I was insecure, but because it felt like control. If they admired me, they couldn't question me. If they respected me, they wouldn't get too close. And if they didn't get too close, they'd never see the parts of me I wasn't sure how to explain. That was the deal I made with myself. You get the polished version, the sharp edges, the certainty, the answers. But you don't get access. Not really. There was a night, I don't think I've ever said this out loud. I was at a private gathering. Dim lights, expensive silence, people pretending not to measure each other. I remember standing near the window, drink in hand, watching my reflection blend into the city behind me. Someone walked up to me. She smiled. Not impressed. Just curious. That alone threw me off. We talked. Not long, but long enough for her to say something that stayed longer than it should have. "You're hard to read," she said. I smirked. Of course I did. That was the point. But then she added, quietly, almost like she wasn't sure if she should. Not mysterious. Just distant. That word hit differently. Distant. Not powerful. Not composed. Not in control. Just removed. I brushed it off in the moment. Changed the subject. Shifted the tone. Took the conversation back where I had the advantage. But later that night, I couldn't shake it, because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. She just said it in a way no one else had. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't stay where they're not felt. They might admire you. They might even chase you for a while. But if they can't feel you, they eventually stop trying, and I made sure nobody could. Not intentionally, at least that's what I told myself. I called it standards, boundaries, discipline, but if I'm being honest, it was fear, not fear of losing them, fear of being known by them. Because being known means being seen without control, without the ability to edit yourself mid-sentence, without the shield of perfection, and I didn't trust anyone with that version of me. So I became consistent, predictable in the way I showed up, measured in the way I spoke, detached in the moments that should have required something real. I knew exactly how much to give, and more importantly, how much to hold back. Tell me something. Have you ever been in a room full of people who respect you, but there's not a single person you could call when everything falls apart? That's not power. That's isolation wearing a tailored suit. And it gets worse. Because after a while, you forget how to tell the difference between being valued and being needed. People valued what I represented, but they didn't need me. And that distinction, it doesn't hurt immediately. It shows up later, when something shifts, and suddenly all the admiration in the world feels useless. There was this one moment. I keep coming back to it. I was sitting across from someone who genuinely cared about me. No noise, no distractions, just presence. She asked me a simple question. "What are you afraid of?" And I froze. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I didn't have an answer I was willing to say out loud. So I did what I always did. I deflected, turned it into something lighter, less dangerous, something that kept me in control. She didn't push. She just looked at me, like she understood something I wasn't admitting. That look, it wasn't admiration. It was distance forming in real time. And I let it happen, because in that moment, staying protected felt more important than being real. That's the trade nobody warns you about. Every time you choose to be admired over, understood, you win the moment and lose the person. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you look around and realize nobody actually knows you, not your fears, not your doubts, not the version of you that exists when everything else goes quiet. And the worst part? They don't even try anymore. Because you trained them not to. I built that, piece by piece, and I told myself it was strength. But strength doesn't leave you alone in rooms that are full of people. Strength doesn't make you feel like you're performing in every conversation. Strength doesn't make you question whether anyone would stay if you stopped being impressive for just one moment. And that question, I never answered it. Not then. Because I think part of me already knew what the answer might be, and I wasn't ready to face what that would say about everything I had built. I told myself I was in control, but control is just fear dressed in discipline. That's the part nobody claps for. I built systems for everything. My time, my conversations, even my emotions had boundaries. Nothing got in without being filtered, measured, approved. It made me efficient. It made me sharp. It made me safe. But safety has a side effect no one warns you about. It slowly removes anything that requires trust. And trust? I treated it like a liability. There was a night I remember too clearly. Late, past midnight, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. I was sitting in my living room, lights off, just the city leaking through the windows, phone face down on the table, a message waiting. I knew it was there. I didn't pick it up. Not because I was busy, but because I already knew what it wanted from me. Presence. Honesty. Something real. And I wasn't sure I could give that without losing control of the moment. So I sat there, still, almost frozen, like answering it would open something I couldn't close again. That's when it hit me. Quiet, almost surgical. I don't avoid people, I avoid what they might see. And that realization? I didn't like it, because it meant this wasn't strength. It was strategy built around fear. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you control everything, you don't experience anything. You manage it, you shape it, you dilute it until it fits your comfort, but you don't actually feel it. And I had gotten so good at managing that I forgot what it meant to let something just happen. Even in relationships, I stayed one step ahead, always anticipating, always adjusting. If things got too deep, I'd pull back. If someone got too close, I'd shift the dynamic, not enough to break it, just enough to regain control. It was subtle, almost invisible, but over time, it built distance, not dramatic distance. The kind you can explain away, the kind where everything looks fine on the surface, but something underneath stops growing. Tell me something. Have you ever been so composed, so in control, that you didn't even realize you were slowly disconnecting from everything that mattered? Because it doesn't feel like loss at first. It feels like stability. That's the trap. I remember a moment, different night, different room, warm lighting, low conversation. She was sitting across from me, closer than usual. There was a pause in the conversation. Not awkward, just open. An opportunity. I could have said something real, something that didn't sound polished, something that actually came from me, not the version of me I'd perfected. And for a second, I almost did. I felt it rise. That impulse to drop the guard just for a moment. But then, I stopped it, redirected, smoothed it out, chose something safer, and the shift was immediate. Not loud, not confrontational, just subtle disappointment in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but I felt it. That was the moment I realized something I wish I hadn't. You don't lose people when things go wrong. You lose them when nothing ever gets real, and I was the master of almost real, close enough to keep them there, distant enough to stay protected. It worked until it didn't. Because eventually, people stopped trying to break through something that never opens, and I didn't open. Not fully, not in the ways that mattered. I told myself I was selective, that not everyone deserved access, and maybe that's true, but if no one gets access, then what exactly are you protecting? That question stayed with me longer than I expected, because I didn't have an answer that made me feel strong, only one that made me feel exposed. And exposure was the one thing I avoided at all costs, even if it meant losing something real, even if it meant slowly becoming a version of myself that no one could truly reach, including me. That's the part that lingers. Not the control, not the distance, but the realization that I built a life where nothing could hurt me, and in the process, I made sure nothing could touch me either. And once you reach that point, you start to wonder something you can't easily undo. Was I protecting myself? Or just hiding from something I never had the courage to face? It didn't explode. That would have been easier to understand. It collapsed, quietly, like something inside me just stopped holding its shape. 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because I checked it more than once, like confirming it would somehow make the moment less real. The room was dark, but not fully. There was a thin line of light cutting across the floor from the window, slicing the space into something that felt divided. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed, shoes on, like I hadn't decided whether I was staying or leaving something I couldn't name. My phone was in my hand, unlocked, that message sitting there, unchanged. I don't feel you anymore. 4 words. No anger. No accusation, just absence. And that's what made it heavier than anything she could have said. I read it again and again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I was trying to find a version of it that didn't feel final. There wasn't one. Here's the part I didn't expect. I didn't react. No immediate pain, no panic, just stillness, like my mind refused to process it all at once, but something deeper, something quieter, started shifting, and I felt it. Not emotionally, structurally, like something that had been holding me together, just loosened. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, phone hanging loosely in my hand, and for the first time in a long time, there was nothing to perform, no response to craft, no angle to control, no version of me to present, just me, and I didn't know what to do with that. That's when the thought hit. Not loud, not dramatic. She's right. and I hated how true it felt, because it wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about that moment. It was everything leading up to it. Every time I held something back, every time I chose control over honesty, every moment I felt something real, and decided not to show it. They all stacked up, quietly, invisibly, until suddenly, there was nothing left for her to feel. And the worst part? I saw it coming, not consciously, but somewhere in me. I knew. I just thought I could manage it. Adjust, redirect, maintain, like I always did. But this wasn't something you could manage. Because connection doesn't fade all at once. It erodes in the spaces where truth never gets spoken. And I created a lot of those spaces. Tell me something. Have you ever lost something important? Not because you did something wrong, but because you didn't do something real? That's a different kind of regret. There's no clear mistake to fix. No moment you can point to and say, that's where it broke. It's just a slow realization that you were present, but never fully there. I looked at the message again. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have replied. I could have said something honest, something unfiltered, maybe even something that would have changed the outcome, but I didn't. And this is the part that still stays with me. I didn't know how. Not in that moment, not without sounding like a stranger to myself, because I had spent so long controlling what I expressed that when it actually mattered, I had no access to the real version of it. So I sat there. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt irrelevant. The room didn't change, the message didn't change, but something inside me did, not dramatically, just enough. Enough to realize that all the things I built, the control, the image, the distance, none of it could hold on to something that required honesty, and I wasn't honest. Not when it mattered. I didn't cry. That would have been release. This felt different, heavier, like something had already ended, and I was just now catching up to it. I leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling, phone resting on my chest, and for the first time, I didn't feel in control of anything, not the situation, not the outcome, not even myself. That's when the real collapse started. Not in what I lost, but in what I realized about who I had become. Because if someone can sit across from you, care about you, try to reach you, and still walk away feeling nothing, then what exactly were you giving them? What version of you were they even connected to? That question didn't leave. It stayed there, unfinished, unanswered, and it followed me long after that night ended, because the truth is, that message wasn't the moment I lost her. It was the moment I finally saw what I had been losing in myself all along. And once you see that, you don't just move on. You start wondering something far more dangerous. What else have I already lost that I haven't even noticed yet? I didn't change the next day. That's the lie people like to tell. That one painful moment rewires you. It doesn't. I woke up the same, moved the same, spoke the same, but something underneath refused to go quiet. It followed me into the morning, into meetings, into conversations, even into the spaces where I used to feel untouchable. There was a crack now, not visible, but undeniable. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. A few nights later, I found myself back in that same room, lights off, silence thick enough to hear your own thoughts echo. No messages this time, no distractions, just me, and the version of myself I'd been avoiding. I sat on the floor instead of the bed, back against the wall, like I needed something solid behind me, and for the first time, I didn't reach for my phone. I let the silence stay. That's when it got uncomfortable. Not loud, not chaotic, just honest. Memories started surfacing, moments I had dismissed, redirected, minimized, the look in her eyes when I changed the subject, the hesitation in my voice when things got too real, the way I would almost say something honest, then pull it back at the last second. It wasn't one mistake, it was a pattern, and I built it. Here's the truth I didn't want to admit. I wasn't unaware, I was avoiding the responsibility of being seen, avoiding the risk of saying something real and not being accepted, avoiding the possibility that if I showed everything, it still wouldn't be enough. So I controlled, because control gives you the illusion of safety. But here's the pattern interrupt. Control doesn't protect you from loss. It guarantees a different kind of it. You don't lose suddenly, you lose quietly, over time, in ways you can justify until it's too late. I exhaled slowly, staring into the dark, and I asked myself something I had never asked before. Who would I be if I stopped managing how I'm perceived? The question didn't feel empowering. It felt dangerous, because I didn't have a clear answer. And that uncertainty, that lack of control, that's what I spent years avoiding. Tell me something. If you stripped away everything you used to protect yourself, would there still be someone there worth knowing? Or have you become so good at performing That even you don't know what's real anymore? That question stayed. It didn't resolve. It didn't comfort me. It just sat there, waiting. And the more I sat with it, the more I started to see things differently. Not dramatically, subtly, like noticing how often I paused before saying something honest, and realizing that pause wasn't thoughtfulness, it was fear. Fear of losing control of the moment. Fear of saying something that couldn't be taken back. Fear of being seen in a way that didn't align with the image I had built. And that image, I started to question it, not its effectiveness. That part worked, but its cost, because every version of me that people admired was built on top of something I chose not to show, and eventually, there's nothing left underneath. That realization didn't break me. It unsettled me, in a quiet, persistent way, like knowing something needs to change, but not knowing how to begin without losing everything you've built. That's the part nobody talks about. Growth doesn't feel like progress at first. It feels like instability, like you're stepping out of something solid, into something undefined, and for someone like me, that's terrifying, because I built my life on certainty, on control, on knowing exactly who I was in every room. But now, there were moments, small ones, where I hesitated, where I almost said something real, where I felt the urge to stop performing, even just for a second. And every time, I caught myself, not stopping it completely, but noticing it. And that awareness, it changed something. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to make me realize I can't keep living like this. Not without losing more than I already have. The success, the control, the image. None of it means anything if there's no one who actually knows you behind it. And maybe that's the hardest truth. You don't fix this by achieving more. You fix it by risking something you've been avoiding your entire life. But that risk, it doesn't come with guarantees. It doesn't promise you'll get back what you lost. It doesn't even promise you'll be understood. All it does is give you a chance to be real. And standing there, in that quiet room, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit before. I don't know if I've ever truly been that. Not fully. Not without holding something back. And now the question isn't whether I should change. It's whether I even know how to start. Or if I've been this version of myself for so long, that the real one might not even recognize me anymore.